So I wanted to talk to you in this video about why fearful avoidants tend to want to act like they're in a relationship, but not actually want to be in one. So this is a very common experience for fearful avoidance as a whole, and we're going to discuss the different dynamics of why this occurs. So, if you're not familiar with fearful avoidant attachment style, it's essentially one of four major love styles that we develop. Everybody has an attachment style, aka love style, and the fearful avoidant tends to be the one that's kind of hot and cold. So they're sort of like the push pull person. It's like they're like, "Come get close to me, come get close to me," and then you get closer, and they're like, "No, get back." And it's because they have both an anxious and avoidant side, and they tend to have competing associations about what love means. In other words, they tend to get mixed messages growing up that love can be a great thing, but love can be a really unsafe and untrustworthy thing. And so, because of those competing ideas they have about love that are programmed into their subconscious mind, it causes them to kind of have these swings back and forth between feeling safe and open to loving and connecting and really afraid of it at the same time. So, fearful avoidance tend to do this thing sort of as a result of that, but there's a lot more to it where they want to act like they're in a relationship, but not actually be in one. And so, what you need to know first about this is that we have different stages of relationships as a whole. We have a dating stage, which is really our vetting stage of relationships. We have a honeymoon stage, which is the stage where we start to we're in a monogamous relationship or we've committed to a relationship in some way or another, depending on what type of relationship you're in. Like if you're a polyamorous relationship person, then maybe you've made a commitment to this person being a primary partner or whatever version that might be for you. And then you get into the power struggle stage. And then after that, we've got the stability, commitment, and bliss stages. So there's six major stages. It's based off of the work of Dr. Susan Campbell or Susan Johnson, sorry. I have a family member named Susan Campbell and my brain always does that. Anyways, so when I'm just laughing at myself here for a second. So when we get into this dynamic, what ends up happening is we have fearful avoidance who they start off in the dating stage and they do extremely well because we don't actually have a lot of our childhood wounds come up that are unresolved until we've attached to somebody. In other words, what happens essentially is that in childhood, we have a primary attachment figure and a secondary attachment figure, and those are our parents or caregivers. And then we grow up and we tend to subconsciously replace our primary attachment figures with our adult romantic relationships. And so when we're first dating somebody, it's not like we've deeply attached yet, right? We haven't really let somebody in. Once an attachment bond is formed, that tends to be the place from which all the things that were unresolved from childhood tend to get brought up and projected onto your new primary attachment figure in your adult life, which tends to be your romantic partner. So for fearful avoidance, they tend to be very good at like reading people, making people feel seen, connecting to them. So they tend to do very well in the dating stage at building bonds, kind of winning people over, charming them, building connections, finding people that they're interested in and connecting with them. And then the honeymoon stage, once that attachment starts to grow deeper roots, actually tends to be where the fearful avoidance start to experience chaos. Now, here's a big reason why. Fearful avoidance, one of the biggest core wounds, according to integrated attachment theory, tends to be that the fearful avoidant really fears betrayal and almost expects betrayal in some way or another. When you're just dating somebody, not only is there not a deep attachment bond formed, but also there's nothing to be betrayed yet, right? Like you haven't made a commitment to anything that can be taken back or broken. And so fearful avoidants don't have a lot of those fears coming up yet. Once there's a commitment and there's this commitment to deeper roots being built, that's where the fearful avoidance starts having fears come up, struggles. And this is where they tend to internally experience a lot of emotional chaos. Once there's a commitment in a relationship, they start to feel like they're in these push-pull patterns. They tend to feel anxious one day, really avoidant the next, and that pendulum swings back and forth, and they usually experience things like wanting to have more closeness and fearing being left. And maybe later in that day or later in the week, fearing that the person's getting too close, and then switching back to fearing that the person's going to abandon them. And they have a lot of these inner push pull patterns that are really, quite exhausting for them to experience and tend to make them feel like relationships are really hard. And as a result of this constant cycling of all these different emotions, they can also, because of that exhaustion of the push pull happening within them and their thinking and the way they're perceiving the relationship, they can also get angry or triggered more often. They have more core wounds as a general rule. And so a lot starts happening to them in their inner experience once they've made a commitment to somebody. It signifies that those deeper roots are being built. And it's almost like that's when the chaos will start to unfold. Now, consciously, most fearful avoidants don't realize this, right? They don't get into relationships and go, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. And like, I always know that when I get to the honeymoon stage of this, that I start to have these push-pull patterns. In fact, usually fearful avoidants think it's the other person in the relationship, because wherever we're in trauma and we're coping, we're not really growing and really seeing our inner world that clearly and recognizing our side of the coin, right? Our side of the experience and how we might be showing up in a way that could cause some of the pain and turmoil. But on some subconscious level, fearful avoidants associate that once they get into a commitment stage in a relationship, that there starts to be more pain, more frustration, more exhaustion, more suffering. On top of that, another big reason is that fearful avoidants tend to really become codependent once they start building deeper attachment roots. And so they start feeling like they have to give of themselves, deprioritize their own needs, their own boundaries, their own feelings, and pour into that other person once they've made that attachment-based connection. And that can leave them feeling exhausted, burnt out, and really going into that avoidance side. So I'll tell you two more things in just a moment. But if you want to do a deep dive into this issue, really it's a codependency issue and a building trust issue at its core. So, see where you struggle more. Is it a boundary thing with codependency, or is it just not being able to trust people? And so that's part of why all these things are coming up. And I have two courses you can check out for free for 7 days using the link down below. One is called Repairing Broken Trust. It's actually about if you struggle to trust people as a whole, how to learn to self-trust, how to learn to do things that will help you feel like you can assert yourself and be clear in articulating your boundaries and needs so that you can build more trust and relationships in your life. And we have a codependency course that's all about learning how to reprogram codependent patterns, codependent beliefs where you think you're responsible for everybody and their feelings and their well-being at the expense of like having time for the relationship to yourself. So anyways, both of them you can get through in under 7 days. They're about an hour and a half each, and they will give you the breakthroughs you need in a very short period of time to stop being codependent, to stop self-sacrificing, or to actually learn to trust and understand why trust has been so hard this whole time. So again, check them out for free if it's something you want to dive into, and the link is down below. So a couple other things to really notice in here for fearful avoidance is, when they are in this like pre-commitment space, it's like they feel like they can love, give love, be loved, be themselves a little bit more. They feel like there's not as many expectations on them. And again, it doesn't even mean that they have an expectant partner, but fearful avoidants tend to feel like once they are committed to something, that there's all this expectation and pressure that comes with it. And a lot of that is just self-induced. It's like this pressure and expectation they put on themselves in the way that they expect themselves to show up in relationships. And so all of these things can lead to exhaustion, inner turmoil, frustration, a lot of being on the roller coaster, feeling angry and frustrated, and then feeling guilty and ashamed for expressing their anger and frustration. But those things don't tend to happen in the pre-commitment stages. Hence, why fearful avoidance, even though they may not realize all their inner mechanics consciously before like understanding and doing some of this work, they tend to have this somewhat of a recognition that like relationships are easy for me until I make the commitment. And then they for some reason tend to get really hard. And so they will often, as a result of that somewhat understanding or knowing about themselves, end up trying to avoid serious commitment, trying to just like act like they're with you and together with you and really extend out the dating stage, or go back to just dating without being committed and do these things because they're trying to maintain that connection. They want love, but they also fear it. And a lot of those fears literally come to the surface when a commitment has been made. So they'll try to sabotage to stay in the dating stage or slow things down or say that they just want to continue the situation of seeing you and not making that full commitment. And there's actually deep reasons for them in it. Now, I will make a separate video about what to do if you're having this experience, because it doesn't mean that you should just stay in this relationship dynamic, right? You shouldn't, if it's not happy for you, healthy for you, or what you want. There's a way of communicating and addressing these things as well if you're on the receiving end. But if you're the fearful avoidant watching this, hopefully this is a very helpful video for you to just deeply understand yourself and also why some of those things happen, right? And it's not your fault. It's the fact that you went through trauma that hasn't been processed and healed. But by digging into that trauma and doing that healing work, you can empower these things to change. So you can have that same level of excitement and pleasure and enjoyment as you have in the dating stage extended through the other stages of relationship. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying these videos, and I will see you in future ones.